Salam alaikum, shalom, peace and blessings, everyone. Welcome to this week's session. This is Universal God, Message of Peace. I'm Lale Tunsa. We have Dr. Zahir and Rabbi Wiseman here. And this week, we're going to be talking about the topic of righteous hatred. So, is religious hatred justifiable? And this week, Dr. Zahir will be starting. And next week, God willing, we'll hear Rabbi Wiseman's perspective on this topic. So as usual, over to you, Dr. Zahir, and we'll ask questions at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I begin in the name of the God whose mercy is profound, whose kindness is forever. I would need his mercy more than on most occasions in this presentation. Is religious hatred justifiable? You know, if I was to give an immediate answer, it would sound something like this. Yes, but. Now, it's answers like these that actually create problems. Most religion-based problems are created because of the fact that the answers that are provided to certain tricky questions sound somewhat similar to what I've said. Yes, it's okay, it's justifiable, but now a certain behavior that is justifiable in certain circumstances is something that obviously needs to be understood properly, clearly, in detail, what those circumstances are. Because if that's not done, then it's misused, it's misunderstood, and it causes lots of problems. In my understanding, my feeling is that our enemy, Satan, is always looking for such opportunities where some religious text, verdict is used negatively for the detriment of humans. So this is really what the challenge we face, while understanding, practicing, explaining religion. Now, one hatred is obviously clearly justifiable, and that is hatred against Satan, because the evil generated by Satan is certainly worthy of being hated. Why? Simply because if evil is not hated, the evil of Satan, then it's likely to grow. It is in the nature of evil that if it is not dealt with properly, adequately, then it grows to the detriment of everyone, of the environment, of the people. So the one who does evil, he should not necessarily be hated. It is the evil itself that should be hated. So, I mean, if somebody is using negative, foul, aggressive, insulting language, that act should be condemned, not necessarily the person who's doing it. Now, why? That's important to understand. It is important to understand it because we know that God hates some people, and his hatred is mentioned in his texts. So, I mean, when there's something that is mentioned in the divine texts, how can you, convince people that no, this is not good? this is not acceptable, or this is not something which is meant for us. I think it really needs to be very carefully explained why the Almighty hates some people so much that he says that he is going to consign them to the hell, which is the ultimate expression of condemnation and hatred. So this obviously needs further clarification, because somebody who's not properly understanding the text and religion, and the understanding is superficial, the end result is that uh, people pick those parts of the text and then they are misused. And really, it's on both sides. Those who are against religion, they would say, look, this is what your religion says, this is what you claim to be your creator's text, this is what it's saying. So therefore, did we not say that this world is a place worse than it could be had there been no religion? So it's something that needs to be properly explained, and obviously in the process we will critically examine our understanding, our justification, rationale that we present. Now, let me give you my understanding. Why is it that uh, not just evil, but some evil people also need to be hated sometimes? And why is it that normally those who do evil should not be hated? Uh, my understanding is that uh, there is both good and evil in humans, in all of us. One part of us is inclined towards evil. Evil is attractive. Evil gives us immediate rewards, gratification. Good behavior is, it satisfies, it gives us peace within us. But it is demanding at times, it's very uh, challenging and testing. But both these aspects are there within us, and we've talked about it when we talked about human conscience. Now, why did God arrange for this kind of human nature within us? What was the point? Honestly, I mean, it is the duty, it is the responsibility of religion and those who are presenting religion to explain uh, why is the religion appearing the way it is. Uh, my understanding is that uh, God gave us the inclination towards goodness, virtue, piety, as well as weakness within us to do wrong and to be immediately impressed by the evil we do and its consequences. Uh, because he also gave us something in addition, which to me is the most important aspect of human personality, and that is discretion, freedom, the independence that we have within us to make choices. Now, the Almighty wants us to make use of this, exercise this discretion that is available to us as independent beings, entities, and thus be able to justify, impress the Almighty that they are eligible to be given the ultimate place of success in the paradise. And that is what makes this life a test. It's a it's a trial and a test that would ultimately end in people either being eligible for the paradise or otherwise. Um, to be honest, I mean, uh, let me say this as well, that This is not the explanation of life. There is no other explanation, justification possible. Because then obviously this life has lots of evil, um, injustices going on. It can't be justified unless there is an understanding of another life where all the woes, sufferings, injustices are going to be adequately taken care of, and those who suffered are going to be compensated and rewarded for the good behavior and the patience that they showed. So this would not have been possible had we not had the understanding of good and bad, inclination towards both in different ways, and our ultimate discretion to choose one from the other, knowing that evil is evil, and yet it's attractive, it's immediately rewarding, and the good is good, but demands quite often sacrifice. So now, even when one does evil, there is still goodness within us, uh, and it has the chance of overcoming evil. So it's not that when we do something wrong, we cause harm to others, we tell lies, we cheat, or whatever evil form our behavior might take. There is this possibility of the good aspect of our personality to actually stage a comeback and be able to overcome evil. Uh, so even while when we are doing evil, we have that good aspect of us still there, uh, you know, with the possibility of staging a comeback. Therefore, while evil should be hated, the one who is doing it uh, should not be hated. Evil should be hated. The one who is doing evil should at times be reprimanded, rebuked, at times be punished, but the person doing evil should not be hated because the person has the potential of overcoming that weakness and of making use of this God given discretion to, turn the tables. So the individual should not be condemned. It's only the act that he has done that should be condemned. And we've already talked about another topic that is very closely related to what I'm discussing, and that is repentance. Because the door for repentance is always open. That is why a person who does evil should not be hated because he has a lot of potential, possibility of coming back and returning. In actual fact, there is a hadith of the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, which says, well, I'm paraphrasing it, that don't hate the person who is doing evil uh, because you never know what might be the person's end. And you never know what your end is going to be like. And if you hate somebody who is doing evil, you're actually being arrogant. You have a feeling that probably you're superior to him, which is not something that you can actually justifiably claim. Because giving an analogy, for as long as the time of the match is still there is always a chance for the opponent team to score goals against the winning one and turn the tables. So, I mean, you cannot make a declaration of your victory before it's all over. So, I mean, we have to continue to respect the individual and his ability, capacity, and potential to return to good ways. And therefore, hating the evil, the person who is doing evil, is not on. It's not something which is acceptable. However, if despite the presence of that conscience that we have talked about, if an individual continues to do what is wrong and evil, so we hear this voice of concern, of protest from within us, uh, and at times, uh, our conscience pricks, and the voice is so loud, or we are sensitive enough to respond to its call positively, and we feel ashamed. So long as that voice is still there, the person is good. Uh, but imagine, I mean, if a person continues to ignore that warning coming from inside, and goes to an extent that the voice is weakened. It's not any. It's not as loud as it was earlier, and reaches a point of no return, and the person becomes incorrigible in a way that he is doing things wrong, but he doesn't feel from inside uh, any remorse, regrets. Uh, this would happen after a very long time. And only God knows that it has happened in the case of a certain individual or not. At times, he tells his prophets about some people. So they also respond to the expectation of the Almighty regarding certain individuals. And it happens, when it happens towards the very end of their project, mission. Uh, However, we humans, we don't know, we can't tell. Never ever can we tell that a person has come to a point of no return, and therefore, I mean, there's nothing good left in him. So we can't hate anyone, even if the person is doing um, any volume of evil that you can think of. Now, it's also obvious from the text, divine text, that even the prophets are uh, reluctant to hate people, uh, even though the Almighty is inclined to expect that they should start hating it. I mean, it's a very interesting part of the text where it seems that to begin with, there is an apparently disagreement between the creator and his representative, because the representative has not been informed clearly that he has to hate. So going by human nature and the good soul that prophets are, uh, they continue to forgive, to ignore the evil of others. But there then comes a point when the Almighty says that, enough is enough, and I'm telling you that these people are not worthy of your uh, concern and sympathy anymore. So it's at that time that the Almighty then asks them that they should not have any further hopes of improvement in the behavior of some people. In other words, humans are hated only when they destroy their inner self completely. And this is what the Quran tells us, that when people do things wrong knowingly and deliberately, they're actually being unjust and unfair to themselves. They are destroying themselves. Uh, when we do wrong, we do that, we harm ourselves. But then we have the potential of, as I said, correcting ourselves. And this is available for a very long time, even when we are continuously doing evil. But there are some people who go as far as the extent where the boundary reaches when they cannot return. So that is when it is said that now they have harmed their souls so much that they can't be corrected, reformed. Uh, we know, for instance, in the example of many of the apparent enemies of prophets, that to begin with they showed enmity, strong opposition to the message of God, and expressed their hatred against the message, and later they embraced belief. So that in itself is an indication, a testimony of the fact that there is goodness in humans that remains there, still, you know, there. Uh, it's possible, and it still survives at even at a very uh, low level of survival, and it can always bounce back. Uh, Now, religious hatred, I must say, is a huge problem, uh, and it can only be corrected and rectified by presenting the correct understanding of the text. Uh, so, as I was saying, that there is a mention of hatred against some people, hatred of those who have rejected the truth knowingly and have done it so persistently that there is no chance of them reforming. It is mentioned in the divine texts. God says it, his prophets follow it, but the context has to be clarified. And the context can only be clarified if the text is properly read and properly presented. Otherwise, a superficial reading of the text by people who are not somehow trained to understand the text in its totality. And that is what really is expected by the Almighty. Whenever we read the text, we read it properly, critically, and with deep reflection. Let's face it that there are some apparently hatred generating verses. If we're not going to accept this reality, we'll never be able to rectify the problem. Uh, because had those verses not been there, um, the problem of religious hatred would never have arisen. But we know that these verses have a context. And if they're not, if the context is not properly explained, then it can create a huge problem. And you see, the context, when it is explained to a neutral person, it would become clear that, it was specific to a certain individual or to a certain situation or to a certain era. It cannot be generalized. And that reality needs to be explained over and over again. So if that is not done, it will create problem. I've seen a tendency amongst religious people that when they talk to each other, quite often they talk to each other about the teachings which are commonly understood by all religious people. And we avoid talking about the difficult verses because they're going to create problems. Uh, that's not the right attitude, I think, because I mean we are creating an impression uh, in the minds of others that we are selective in our understanding and presentation of religion. I mean, if religion is from God, it really has to be justifiable totally and completely. And those verses which are apparently not justifiable, apparently, they also need to be explained so that people understand that, okay, that's what it actually means. And I've said it before, and I want to mention it here as well. This is my understanding, and obviously everybody has a right to say that it's an exaggeration. But I believe that the biggest tragedy of our present contemporary times is that the correct understanding of certain Quranic verses uh, has not been appreciated and presented to both Muslims and non-Muslims. And I call it the biggest tragedy because of two reasons. One is that people, they quote those verses and then they actually get involved in fighting against other people. Killing becomes a very routine exercise, something not particularly problematic. And hatred is considered to be a part of your religious approach behavior. And the other problem associated with this phenomenon is that the message is not understood. It is it is not possible for a large number of good humans to ever imagine and believe that such a text could actually be from our creator. So I think this topic is a very important topic, that we continue to talk about the possibility of religious hatred and the reason why there is religious hatred, and what part of it is justifiable and what part of it is not justifiable. I'm sure that the topic was was really not easy for me to present, and therefore, whatever I have done, I'm sure it needs to be further improved. But that's all from me now. Thank you very much.
Well, it's going to be an interesting week next week because it's a very tough topic. Um, from your first sentence, I've been holding on to that first sentence. It's always a problem. Said the answer is yes, but. And I think I'm probably going to end up with a yes, but also. And then I was thinking, well, maybe I should say no, but. You know,
That's right.
if somebody says to me, is it all right to do drugs? I would say no, but there are times when you can do drugs, right? There are times when drugs are necessary. But in general, if you're asking me that question, I know that if you're asking me that question, I should be nervous. That's and so if somebody came to me and they asked me, is it okay to hate? I think I would say no and say and or but and then give the details because once I say yes, they may not hear anything else. Um, and the danger, they won't actually hear the but and everything that comes after it. And I think that's I think one of the things that I'm going to have to deal with, and I think you dealt with it nicely, is that not only are people ignorant, but these texts have been weaponized. They have been weaponized, and a good-hearted person who's trying to get information nowadays, right, is now where would a person go to get information nowadays? Well, you go to Imam Google, right, Rabbi Google, right, and who knows what you're going to find there, right? And you're going to find people who really do, and of course, for their own political purposes, their own personal purposes. Um, for whatever the particular perversion is, right? They're weaponizing these ideas, and it's very hard to combat that because even if you combat it, you're then now just kind of in this great soup of ideas that are out there, and people are going to choose those things. Um, they're going to choose those things sometimes that respond or that stimulate what's not so good in them. And there's a power to hatred. I mean, that negative side of ourselves, you know, really gets a charge out of hatred. And that is that's that's certainly a problem, right? It is something which can be very attractive. Um, just even neurologically is very attractive, right? Because you get your adrenaline pumping, right? Get a little bit of dopamine in there, right? Right? People get high off of it. And and in a group you get that extra social effervescence, so everybody is even more worked up. And so that it's gonna be an interesting question for me too. And thank you for your presentation on it. And I think that the one thing that I want to reinforce and agree with you very strongly is that there's a very big difference between hating the deed and hating the person, because we very rarely give up on people. And one of the things that I have to think about is this idea of God's enemies, right? Is there such a thing as is there a point at which is there a point at which it's no longer an inner struggle but becomes rebellion, right? Is there for most of us when we do wrong, it's the result of an inner struggle, and sometimes we win and sometimes we lose, right? But is there a point at which the person's behavior really becomes rebellion, and then they become an enemy? And that's and that language, of course, we're going to see. I'll talk about it next week. But the Torah uses that language, right? And I have to think about that. And King David, in particular, uses that language a lot. And where he talks about his enemies as God's enemies, right? So what does that mean? Is that because he has some special insight, or is that because he's observing, and yeah, these people, these are people who have kind of, as you said, kind of given up on their souls to the extent that they're now in full rebellion. And so I have to think about that. So that should be, I have a whole week of things to think about. Thank you very much.
Your immediate first feedback on my response, yes, but uh, probably more appropriately should have been uh, phrased as no. But I absolutely agree. I'm corrected, and thank you very much for it. I think you're right. When you say yes, but probably the shutters are down for many people. They would not listen. So it's all over. And I think as people who have some message to deliver, I'm sure you will agree with me that it's so very important that we are very careful in the choice of our words. That, particularly in this age, when there are so many different options available, one statement or word which does not seem acceptable to somebody who's listening to you, and the channel would be changed. The
Oh yeah.
person would, you know, move away to somebody else. So thank you very much. I absolutely agree with you. I think, I just have to mention again, you know, this justifiable hatred has something to do with the fact that we do take decisions willingly, and somebody is uh, deciding incorrectly, knowing what he's doing is incorrect and is bent upon it. And something of that sort is what really uh, leads the Almighty to ultimately decide that, he's disappointed me so badly that I don't have anything to do with it. But yes, it is a difficult topic. And let's hear Dr. Lal about it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zahir. You mentioned some very powerful points, and thank you for your comments, Rabbi Wiseman. It is such a big topic, and something that I'm really, really passionate about. And I guess the reason why we set up this charity, Universal God Message of Peace, is because, it was, I could see as well that there was so much negative stuff happening in the world, and harm caused because of religion. Because of ignorance or arrogance, and religion was used as a weapon in order to do hate crimes, acts of terrorism and stuff like this all over the world. And then you would get hate crimes against people who practice those religions, the good people who just wanted to peacefully practice those religions. So it was just sort of, so I thought, well, it would be good to, try to set up a charity where we can try and promote all the good things that are in the scriptures, all the beautiful attributes of our Creator, all the quotes, there's, the verses about loving your neighbor as yourself and loving your God as your, with your heart, mind, and strength, and about acts of kindness and charity and forgiving, loving your enemies and forgiving those who have wronged you and not holding on grudges. And I think instead, sometimes, people look at scripture and they pick out a verse, and it's like a test for them, really, for all of us. And we can choose, we have that freedom of choice to choose what we read in order to suit our own purposes, or to use it to, serve God and really seek the truth behind it. And as you said, Dr. Zahia, it's so important to try and seek out what really our Creator wants us, why these messages are in there. And I agree, there are some verses which, where you can easily interpret it as God hates us, and, it's okay to hate people. But I completely agree with you. I think the more we try to see God in everybody and everything, I think the less likely we are to be able to hate people, because as long as, we're all breathing, as you say, we all have goodness within us, I believe. I don't know. I mean, I know that in scripture it says that there are some people, it's too late for them and God has destroyed them and things, but that's God. We are not God. And how are we able to make that judgment? And even if we don't understand it, are we trying to be God? Who are we to judge other people? And the safest thing to do, I think, is to, as you say, to hate Satan. If we are to hate, let's hate Satan, who is part of every single one of us. And so let's direct that hatred towards that. But even that, I think, is, we can, if we really search for it, we can even see wisdom in Satan. God forgive me if I'm saying anything bad, but ultimately, yes, good comes from God and evil comes from the hands of man and our free will. But even evil indirectly comes from God, and God has willed it to, everything comes from God. So even in that, I think, is wisdom if we look for it, and it's there for a reason. And my understanding of righteous hatred is that if it brings us to a place of love, then it's okay. And actually hatred can help us to really appreciate love, and it can really reveal the unconditional love of our Creator. And just like a child might think that, feel that their parent who disciplines them and is harsh with them, and corrects them and punishes them, actually hates them, they might really feel that they are not loved. But I think that's the way that the parent sometimes chooses to reveal themselves to the child, but it comes from a place of love. And we are able to experience that as a parent. If you are a parent, do we ever really hate our child if he or she is doing acts of evil? Can we ever really hate our child, even if they did the worst thing, even if they murdered somebody? Or I know maybe some people can, and maybe maybe that comes from a good place because they feel like they should. But I think ask any mother, and I don't believe the answer will be yes, they will hate their child. They will hate what they did, but they will always make excuses for them. And perhaps the hatred that we see in the scriptures is just the hatred that God chooses to reveal himself to us. But actually beneath all of those words is actually a hidden love. And that's how I choose to see it. and otherwise I think there's no hope for humanity, really. Because
Next week, maybe I'll talk about the difference between anger, disappointment, and hatred. They're very different. They're very different things. And what, from God's side, right, I think very often what we see is anger and disappointment, and that's very different from hatred. Anger and disappointment is a response to somebody's behavior, right? Whereas hatred is directed to the person themselves. And I think what we see mostly in God, right, is this, is anger and disappointment, which is anger and disappointment is something that we have when we have hope in somebody, right? We're disappointed with our children when we think they can do better. If we really think they can do better, we're not going to be disappointed with them. If we don't think that they can do better, we probably won't even be angry with them. We'll give up on them. And that's a different thing. So maybe next week we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I just want to very briefly talk about a movie that I just saw a couple of hours ago. I finished it. It's an Indian movie in Hindi. The title is Black and White. It's a story about a suicide bomber who was sent from Afghanistan to blow up at the time when the Indian National Day's celebrations would be taking place in New Delhi. And this young man had 15 days to spend in Delhi before the actual, act of blowing up was to take place. And during these days, he uh, experienced the good behavior of some of the families over there, Hindu families. And right at the moment when it was to be done, he decided that no, I was incorrectly informed, and I'm not going to do it. In other words, honestly, I believe that if this unfortunate hatred that's there amongst people, particularly religious people, one of the most effective ways to get rid of it is to enable people to meet each other and to talk to each other. That way, they would know that others are also like us. We have different backgrounds, but humans are humans, and humans, they are good, generally speaking. And there are many misunderstandings that can be removed when we talk to each other with an open mind, but politely.
Now I have to see the movie. So,
Yeah, please do. Black and
good.
white. The year was 2008. I'm sure that must have been
The black and white. I'll
at
find it.
least.
I'll find it. I found my Hindi is not so good. Even after years of watching Doordarshan, my Hindi is not great, but
Oh,
still.
yeah, you know Hindi. Oh, yeah, you
Yeah.
understand it.
So,
Please
yeah.
do. Please do. Thank you.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you
So much.
Thank you. See you, Charles.
So yeah, thank you so much. And really looking forward to hearing your perspective, Rabbi Wiseman. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
Indeed. Okay. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. God bless you.
Bye.
Bye.